Welcome to another date with your favourite show. It's time for Plank of the Week. In the chairs with me today, I've got two people who we see on Talk Radio an awful lot, but not enough in this particular studio doing Plank of the Week. It is Tonia Buxton on my right, Mr. Richard Tice on my left. Very, very serious people, very, very interesting people as well. But we're going to tell you right now that they also have a bit of a sense of humour. Tonia, do you want to kick us off with your first Plank of the Week?
Yes, it's Sajid Javid.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many reasons that he could be a plank. I mean, he could be a weekly plank, couldn't he?
Yes, he really could.
But on this one, it's the fact that he is now, thankfully, being pushed to take down the mandates for NHS staff.
Yes.
And it's the way he's doing it that just shows you that the man has no guts to him. He should stand up there and say, it's over.
Yeah.
We do not need to vaccinate people anymore.
Yeah.
We especially don't need to vaccinate people from the NHS who've worked throughout this time, getting COVID.
Quite often without a vaccination.
Without vaccination. Listen, most of them got COVID early on and work through and have lots of antibodies. And the fact that he says, but he still says, I've got to read this, whilst vaccinations remain our very best line of defence against COVID-19, I believe that it's no longer proportionate to require vaccination as a condition of deployment through statute. It was never...
No. So in other words, he doesn't want to sack anybody for not being jabbed.
He doesn't want to sack anybody for not being jabbed. You know what he reminds me of? You remember when you were at school, I don't know if you ever had this, but you had this bully that never actually hit you, but used to kind of put their fist right in your face like that. And then you'd
in my
fall...
case, it was the nuns.
Well, mine too. Mine too.
There you go.
But they come right up to you and then you'd fall over.
Yeah.
They'd make you fall over and they'd walk away laughing because you fell over. That's what he reminds me of. He pushed people to the brink like a bully and then had to stand back. He knew he had to stand back. I just hope he holds firm on this because, there's whisperings that he's done that, but we haven't had it set
Well, he
in
said
stone
that he's
yet.
looking at doing it, hasn't he? That's what he said in
So what's he
Parliament.
looking at? What is he waiting
So,
for?
yeah, I mean, they love an inquiry, don't they, the old
He does, but the
politicians.
real thing with him is you can't trust a word he says. You don't know what he truly believes in. And I think you're right, actually. He uses that sort of sense about being he's like an implicit bully. He doesn't need to actually push or hit you just because of the way he conducts himself.
Yeah. And he more or less says...
It's really unattractive.
And by doing what he's done, because he started off by saying, we're not going to ever impose vaccination on anyone. That's not what we do in this country.
That.
Then he did it and said, we'll be firing you if you don't get this done. And now he's saying, we don't think we need to do that anymore. So you kind of go and so you've done a complete sort of 360 degrees on every single subject, right? But he also should now admit, actually, I only really said it because I wanted you to get vaccinated, because that's very clear, right?
Yes, and in a sense, but that's the awfulness of the whole nudge thing, isn't it? And I think a lot of people saw through that early doors. But you've now got so many people in the health service who I think feel they've been used and abused.
Yeah. Exactly that.
And an awful lot of decent, ordinary,
way.
working frontline doctors, nurses, anaesthetists, immunologists, whatever, have all been talking recently and they felt empowered. And you've been involved, haven't you, with that 100,000 group?
Yes, we've moved to the 100K.
And I think that's been really important because I think basically it's given people the strength to go out and say things which they were frightened to say.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that the Together Declaration and the 100K nurses, we've made a big difference. The fact that Sajid, when Dr. Stephen James went up to her, he asked those nurses, what do you think about mandates? Isn't it great? And all of them, because they're fearful of their jobs, they're all kind of looking down, looking around. They weren't making eye contact. They didn't answer him. But then Dr. Stephen James, he stepped up in a calm, wonderful way and said, actually, let me just tell you, this is the reason why I don't think I need a vaccination. And do you know what Sajid said to him? In your opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, what a pillock.
I know.
I mean, you what do you mean, in your opinion? He's a doctor. He's just explained to you step by step why he doesn't need a vaccination working within the NHS. Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, and I am not an anti-vaxxer, it really drives me nuts. I've been vaccinated, alas. I did it out of coercion. I have to be able to travel. My parents are not well. They live in another country. I did not do it for my health. I did it because I was coerced to do it, and I'm angry with myself. Yeah. I trusted the government. I was one of these naive people that thought people got into power because they wanted the best for us, and I trusted them. It's been heartbreaking for me to wake up, and now I don't trust a word that comes out of any of their mouths because they lie.
Well, did you see what Jeremy
time.
Hunt said today? Laura Dosworth pointed this out to me, that he's put out a little message on Twitter saying that, whoever is going to trust the government now when they try to do the right thing, and he thinks that they should go back to actually suggesting that it should be mandatory because he thinks it's the wrong decision. But he actually said, well, who will trust the government now? Well, no one.
The answer is no one.
No one.
No one did before.
Because there've been so many U-turns. And you sort of, even things like the letter in the Sunday Times from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor saying that we're not going to scrap the national insurance rights. Because they've written that, you almost can guarantee before April
that they'll
scrap it.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible way to run a country.
Well, it is. And also, what about all the travel restrictions? Boris gets into the shtuck about Partygate, and suddenly, no more travel, no need to get tested. Don't worry about getting tested before you come back. In fact, you know what? Don't even get tested when you get here. And also, you don't have to self-isolate. Don't worry about doing any of that.
But that's my point. The point is it's all been about controlling us. It's all been about the nudge. None of it is based on a virus.
No.
It's all about taking our powers as a people. And this is a Conservative government.
Yes.
No,
they're not supposed to be
He calls it socialist.
I invented the word,
Yes.
and I think it'll end up in the dictionary, con-socialist. They are now the party of high regulation, authoritarian control, high tax, and that's
massive
not
public
conservative.
spending.
That is a form of socialism. It's a con-socialism, and that's what they all are.
Yeah. And we'll get on to Boris Johnson in a moment, I'm sure, because we're probably going to carry him over from last week. But who's your first nominee?
So my first one, actually completely different tack, is Neil Young. Wonderful singer and songwriter and musician, marvellous, incredible career. But he's just blown it, big time, by thinking that he is bigger than Spotify, he's more important than the right to free speech. And he basically said to Spotify, either you get rid of Joe Rogan, who's, I think, probably the biggest podcast host possibly in the world, either you get rid of him or I'm off and you can't use my songs. And guess what Spotify
They didn't think about it for long, did they?
Bye,
Neil Young.
So long.
As my kids would say, bye, Felicia.
Yeah. So, what a plank.
I know.
What an utter
He's
plank.
actually succeeded in cancelling himself. I think it's the first self-cancel, isn't it?
That actually is a good thing. For people of our persuasion, that is a good thing. He's cancelled himself.
Yeah.
But you know what makes me laugh is that it's like these old rockers. So it's Joni Mitchell, it's Neil Young, and Barry Manilow too. I mean, I'm surprised to hear he's still alive,
I thought Manilow put a tweet out saying that there were rumours that he had done the same thing, but they weren't true.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I think he denied it.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. I can go back to dancing
go
to
back
Barry
to
Manilow.
Copacabana. Don't worry.
So Neil Young is my first plank of the week because I just think what he did is just awful, so unnecessary.
But he's got form, you know that.
Yeah, he's got a bit of
But he's
form.
got form for being a rather unpleasant character.
Yeah, he has.
He hasn't got any form
completely
for being
homophobic.
woke. He hasn't got any form for being woke, which is kind of what he was inferring because he was saying that they were putting out misinformation about COVID, which actually Joe Rogan doesn't do.
No.
He just chats.
Yeah.
But the point is that actually Spotify, it's a platform to host things, whether you're hosting music, you're hosting podcasts, you're hosting debate. And that's what freedom of speech is about. And there's a guy who's, Canadian American, he's in North America. I mean, the home of openness and free speech and democracy. Was.
Well, I was going to listen to one of his podcasts, and somebody said, don't listen to the most recent one because he's interviewing Jordan Peterson and it's 4 hours long. And
it's wonderful.
Well, no, I haven't got 4 hours to spare.
Oh, you put it on in the car as you're driving
I haven't got 4 hours to spare in the car either, unless I'm trying to drive
some of them are really good.
I'm sure they are.
I listened to one that was 3 hours long. But the point is that it's a platform for music and debate and discussion. It's not a sort of a political, I'm so great and big, either you do this or you can't have my music. I mean, who do you think you are?
I know.
Yeah, who are you? Exactly.
Who are you?
But it was also interesting, wasn't it? Because it was kind of a culture clash between people who hadn't heard of Neil Young and people who hadn't heard of Joe Rogan. And it was the old versus the young, if you pardon the expression.
It really was, yeah.
And because people were going, who the hell's Neil Young? Joni Mitchell, what?
I mean, you could say, in the nice possible way, you could say, who the hell's heard of either of them?
Yeah.
But everybody's heard of Spotify.
Yes.
And for a reason that it's a platform for people to be able to enjoy themselves and choose what they listen to.
But this just highlights the erosion of freedom of speech. That's the big thing for me. That's what this is highlighting. The fact that, people are telling us what we can discuss. Now, there's a lot of things that get discussed that I really don't agree with, that we all don't agree with, but we want to discuss them. It's the cancelling out of things that is so worrying. And I just don't want to grow up in a world where we can't have a healthy and nice debate. And one of the things that Joe Rogan does is, because I'd never heard of him really before, so I started listening to him recently because of what's happening. So it's just driven me straight to him.
Yeah.
I know Neil Young's music, it's not for me. But, And what he does is he gets these people on and he questions them and he jabs them and he says, oh, hang on a minute, I don't know if that's true. Could you look that up? So it's not a kind of bombardment of some kind of propaganda. It's a debate and it's a discussion.
Yeah.
It's very engaging and they are quite long, and that in itself is quite unusual.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, I did think it's one of those things where actually Neil Young wasn't quite as valuable as he thought. He clearly didn't realise just how much Spotify had paid Joe Rogan
my favourite
sort
of part of the story in a way, though, was Harry and Meghan's intervention. Because they decided to throw their, 2 pennies worth into the ring when presumably Meghan woke up and saw that they weren't in the news that day and went, right, what can we do? Harry, So, of course, they then said, you should be very careful about what you allow on the platform. But don't worry, we'll still keep the 18 million you've paid us for one podcast. We didn't threaten to leave Spotify or anything because they're so upset because they need the money.
There's nothing to leave. I mean, they haven't actually done anything.
Well, they've done one podcast and Spotify have now taken over production of it because they're going, you guys are useless. We've asked you to do like one podcast a month. So far, they've only done one in a year.
Unbelievable.
It's incredible, isn't
And
it?
they're going to keep that money.
Oh, they will. I mean, I do a podcast which goes out on Spotify as well. I wish I got 1 million and 18 million.
I think you should. You're doing. You're working on it,
We're
Mike.
doing-
You never
we're
know.
doing all right.
I mean, progress.
Listen, it's all going very well. Now, I'm going to bring you my first complete and utter plank, and this is quite recent. It happened, I think, only just a couple of days ago. Whoopi Goldberg, she's on this TV show in America called The View, where she came out with the most unbelievable statement I think I've seen in quite a while, where she basically said that the Holocaust was not about race, in her words, because it was white people killing white people.
What planet's she on?
I mean, it just beggars belief.
Is that not in itself the most racist thing you've ever heard?
Well, you would think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's evidence, I suppose, that a lot of people on the left seem to think that, it can't be racist unless you can't be a victim of racism unless you're black.
I mean, that is so awful. It highlights everything which is wrong with that side of the argument, and you think, how could you even think that, let alone say it?
Right. The wokeism of it's really funny how woke has certain kind of tribes.
Yeah.
So you're woke and you love everyone and everything is fine, but somehow it's okay to be anti-Semitic when you're woke. It seems to be that seems to be the general kind of move in things, because they don't seem to defend anyone who's Jewish. It doesn't matter what happens if you're Jewish.
It's almost like a sort of a standard base case.
Yes.
That being anti-Semitic, which is utterly awful and is in itself racist, is part of being woke.
Yeah.
And part of being progressive.
Right, because you have to be on the side of the Palestinians.
You have to be on the side of the Palestinians.
And that's possibly why there are so many hate crimes being done now to Jewish people.
Yeah.
It's on the rise.
And it's very much on the rise.
And it's because of the woke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's I just think it's sort of one of the most horrendous things. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing it here in the UK.
Yeah, but we really are, and that's the worst thing. And
if it'd been the other way round, though, she'd be cancelled now.
Well, she would, yeah, but
she'd
because she's on the left-hand side of the political debate, that she hasn't been. Because she actually made it worse. She then went on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. This was on Monday night, I think, to try and explain what it was that she had said. And then she said this: when you talk about being a racist, you can't call this racism. This was evil. This wasn't based on skin. You couldn't tell who was Jewish, right? You had to delve deeply and figure it out. My point is, the Nazis had to do the work.
Sorry?
You're kind of going...
Sorry?
So they couldn't basically look... What she's saying is they couldn't look into a room and go, oh, look, there's 3 black people, we'll go and, take them out.
So let me just to kind of work through this. So if you are of mixed heritage, but you're like really pale skins and you don't look like you're black, someone like Meghan, then she can't get any racism. Apparently, is that what she's saying?
That's the logic, isn't it?
Because I've got a lot of mixed race friends or dual heritage friends who look more Greek than I look.
Yeah.
So I don't understand what she's saying.
Exactly right. If the Klan is coming down the street and I'm standing with a Jewish friend, I'm going to run. But if my friend decides not to run, they'll get passed by most times because you can't tell who's Jewish.
Unbelievable.
I mean, how can you even get away with saying those words? I mean, I know we're all about free speech, and I'm not saying she shouldn't be allowed to say them. I'm just expressing absolute incredulity that she would even think that.
And there's no uproar from her saying these words.
No, none at all. That's nothing. The thing. There's no uproar from the woke, from the left. There's no defence. There's no defence on behalf of the Jewish community.
No.
From the people who claim to be the greatest defenders.
Right.
It's just awful.
It's just mind-blowing. Things like this are just, you hear these comments and they just blow your mind. Thinking, where am I living? What year is this? What is going on?
And also, if you want to be historical about it, the Nazis didn't just kill Jewish people.
No, they
They
didn't.
killed an awful lot of other groups of people.
Yeah.
They killed an
Polish.
awful lot of Polish people. I mean,
It was.
I suppose that wasn't in any way racist.
It was.
either. No.
It was ethnic cleansing to the greatest degree.
Yeah.
And as you say, it wasn't just the Jewish. It was.
And last week was Holocaust Memorial Week, and so it's
great,
really highlighted
great
at this time.
timing, is it?
Yeah.
It's really shocking, and you know that when people talk like that about Jewish people, that they probably are quite anti-Semitic.
Yeah, you can feel it.
You
can feel it in the undertone of the words that are coming out of their mouths. You can feel that. Absolutely.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so who's your second?
Oh, so my second has to be Jacinta. I always say her name wrong.
Jacinda.
Jacinda.
Yeah, she was in it last
Ahern.
week as well.
Oh, was she
She's
in
been in
again?
it quite a bit. Well, because of the madness of New Zealand.
Okay,
locking it all down.
But now
telling people,
she's-
not to travel anywhere.
Okay, so we know that she's bat poo bonkers.
She is.
But for me, this what she's done
I
now.
always do my Jacinda Ardern
Yeah.
impression at this moment. I
Jacinda-
won't do it this week.
Jacinda, for me, is what she's done to one poor woman. So Charlotte Bellis is a journalist. She was working in Afghanistan for Al Jazeera, and she got pregnant with her partner. Now, if you are pregnant in Afghanistan, you could be put to death. The Taliban don't agree with being pregnant out of marriage.
Right.
And so she was trying to get home to New Zealand. She filled in 50 documents, all the paperwork, 50 documents to get home. And it has been said that she doesn't have enough evidence to go home. She's had to go back to Afghanistan, put her hands, herself, and her unborn child into the hands of the Taliban, rather than go home to New Zealand where her family is and where she's from. And she said that they said that she did not provide any evidence. She filled in 50 documents. So can you imagine if you are safer with the Taliban, when the Taliban offers you sanctity and your own country doesn't, what does that say about the madness of your country? New Zealand is lost. It's turned into a madness. And unfortunately, she's done such a great job of brainwashing all her people. She's going to get voted in again.
Well, I think her most recent lockdown, which was based on one family going to one wedding in Auckland and like 5 people getting COVID and none of them having it, to the point where they were anywhere near dying. I think her popularity has dipped slightly. You're probably right. She probably still would get re-elected. But it shows you, doesn't it, how much they love this authoritarian control.
But Mike, so what's going to happen in New Zealand? That they're just going to become this hermetically sealed place? Because it's a virus.
Yeah.
It's an airborne virus.
Yes.
It's going to get in and it's going to get you. Just like Omicron's got everybody. I don't know anyone who didn't get Omicron.
Yeah.
Everybody got it.
What is
So
it in the
that's
air
what's gonna
down there?
happen.
I mean, it's like, not only is it New Zealand, I mean, they're like Australia on steroids.
Yeah.
What is it in the air
I
down
know.
there that they've become what we thought was sort of normalised, democratic, freedom-loving, with a sort of a Western approach to life. And suddenly they've become, no, it's completely authoritarian. The police have gone utterly bonkers.
Yeah.
The way that they've abused their powers. And you think, hang on, I mean, as I say, New Zealand is Australia on steroids.
Yeah. And of course, the lockdown fanatics in this country go, see what they did. See how great they did it. Because hardly anybody died.
But
you might as well be dead because you can't do anything.
But interestingly, if you actually look at the other side of it, which is if you look at excess deaths data, for example, then they're no better than many others.
No.
So actually, the data doesn't support that
saving
suggestion.
lives. It doesn't support saving lives. And that's the big thing for me with lockdown and with the whole thing that we have done with COVID is none of it supports saving lives.
What's going on? There don't appear to be the protests in New Zealand that you're beginning to see in Australia and that we're seeing elsewhere, for example, in Canada.
Right.
And I don't understand why. What has she done? How has she brainwashed
She's frightened them.
New Zealanders? I mean, this is the home of the All Blacks, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, these are some of the bravest, toughest, most brilliant rugby players in a very small population. If they've got people like the All Blacks, you think, how's she been able to frighten a whole population? I don't understand.
It is very, very weird.
Where has the fighting spirit gone?
I know.
We've got to keep our eyes on New Zealand because there are over 1 million New Zealanders who live outside of New Zealand who have not been able to see their family for 2 years now.
Right.
So, this can't
Well,
continue.
I've already more or less decided that I've never been to Australia or New Zealand. I quite like the idea of going, but I'm just never going to go now.
Yeah.
I've
don't want
got
them
no
to benefit
interest
from your cash.
I certainly don't. But also, I've got no interest in going there now because I'm kind of, kind of disappointed in what they're doing.
In the people as well,
Yeah,
because they've been so easily brainwashed. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's the thing that gets to me. That's the thing that's opened my eyes so much, is how easily brainwashed or nudged. And I know it's a slow nudge, so it does work really effectively.
Right.
And the fear nudge is the greatest way to nudge anyone.
What is bizarre, though, is that, both New Zealanders and Australians, historically, you think of them as such open, fun-loving, game, give it a go approach to life. That's all that I've ever met have been,
But you know what I think that's about?
I
think a lot of that is about the people who travel to Europe. And I think a lot of the people who don't travel to Europe, who just stay there, a bit like America, where 60% of them still don't have a passport.
Yes.
And they don't leave the country. So
That's
they really don't know anything about it.
Yeah, that's
and
a really
Helen
good
Dale
point.
also says a funny thing about it. She, being Australian, she said, you must remember that these were not just convicts that started in Australia, they were their jailers as well.
Yeah.
So, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. Bit too deep, though.
That's quite deep. I'm sort of trying to be more optimistic.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, listen, the cricket team shouldn't have gone either, because that was a disaster.
That was a proper disaster. They should have read the rules and said, we're going to
No, we're not coming.
We're not coming. We're not going to get thrashed
Your
and
team's
smacked
too
around the
good.
face.
No, exactly right. So, your second one.
So
Richard.
my second one, of course, has to be the leader of the SNP in the House of Commons, the one and only Ian Blackford.
Ian Blackford, as I call him. He's blocked me.
Here's a guy.
Mr. Squigger.
Firstly, because he calls for Boris to resign basically every week since time began,
Right.
that it has less effect. But actually, he was onto something this week in the House of Commons when Boris gave an appalling performance. But because he overstepped the mark in saying that basically Boris had misled the House. Look, we all know that Boris has misled the House on at least one occasion. So he was in the right, but then because he overstepped the rules and the regulations in the House of Commons, which basically say you can't accuse someone of lying in the House of Commons. So he forced the Speaker to ask him to withdraw or say inadvertently. And then, bizarrely, for someone who likes to be big and tough and strong and Scottish, he semi-bottled it.
Yeah.
And he wasn't sure, and he sort of wobbled, and he did this. And
he did that weird thing where
he did a very weird thing.
Complete 360-degree
he turned,
before
and then he
sat down.
and then he said, well, inadvertently, and then the Speaker wanted clarification, and he popped up again, and he bounced around, and he completely lost it. And so the whole thing became not about Boris resigning, it became about whether or not Blackford had blown it,
right,
and whether or not he had the bottle to go through with it. And so, of course, actually, the validity of what he was trying to do and say was lost. And so I think that deserves a serious nomination for Plank of the Week.
Definitely does. But isn't it rather pathetic that we still have this crazy notion that as long as you say inadvertently, then that's okay?
It's it's linguistics.
Surely you should be able to say that you believe somebody misled Parliament. You should be able to say that.
I agree. It is bizarre because you can talk about other people because you've got parliamentary privilege. So you can accuse other people who are non-parliamentarians of X or Y or Z.
So you can basically libel somebody.
So you can libel someone, you can defame someone, and you can't be sued if you're saying it in the House.
Right.
I think it's the House of Commons and the House of
Lords. Yeah, I think it is,
but you can't say to the other side, you've misled the House. That's a lie. It does seem odd.
That's wrong.
The palace of free speech and openness and honesty, it does seem mad.
It seems mad.
And I think then the general public say, just tell it as it is, lad.
Yeah.
And also everybody saw, and we might as well talk about Boris now, because we're going to carry Boris Johnson over, I think, from last week. Nobody needs to nominate him. Because, we all watched him when he was describing how horrific it was when he discovered that Allegra Stratton had been joking about parties that he didn't know about. And then later on decided that he not only knew about the parties, he was actually at one. Right? Even though he didn't know it was a party. And you're kind of going, well, surely the first bit you said then wasn't true.
Yeah.
So when you said how awful it was and how shocked you were about something that you knew about, that clearly was a lie, wasn't it?
Do you know what I would be really interested to do is to do kind of like a bar thing to see who hasn't lied. Is there anyone in that House that hasn't lied to the British public during these past 2 years? Because it's constant, unrelenting lies.
I did enjoy, I forget who, but one MP stood up and asked Boris if there needed to be an inquiry as to whether he was or wasn't in the House at that moment.
Yeah. But this is the thing.
That's brilliant.
And they are now in this ludicrous holding pattern where, having told us all, a week and a half ago, we'll wait for the report, we've waited for the report, and now it turns out that the report isn't coming out or hasn't come out yet. We've only had an update.
That will be my third nomination. We will come on to that.
I will come on to that because that involves the Metropolitan Police.
Okay.
But as far as the Boris Johnson side of it is concerned, it's clearly that he is the beneficiary of all of this, and the fact that he has nothing to do with it is laughable. And we now seem to be living in a kind of banana republic, don't we?
It feels that way.
It does feel that
which
way.
Which is horrific, actually, for a country like the UK to be so embarrassed, so humiliated. I mean, here's a prime minister who's making such a shambles of running his country that he had to postpone a phone call with President Putin.
Well, it gets worse.
In order to deal with boozegate and partygate.
And it gets worse.
How can you have a serious conversation with another world leader and that leader's going to say, so, were you at the party? Were you in the house? Is it your house? Whose house is it? I mean, how can you...
It's just the mind boggles. But apparently today he tried to put another call into Putin. Putin didn't take the call.
I'm not surprised.
And of course, he's now going to Kiev, as I said on the show today. He's supposedly to stop a war happening. He can't even stop a party going on in his house. I mean, he's hardly going to be able to stop the Russians, is he? I mean, it seems ridiculous. Anyway, so time for my second one. I'm going to go slightly off the political spectrum for a while. The campaign for real ale. Now I didn't even know.
Delicious.
I didn't even know they were still going. But I mean, you're in the hospitality business. I don't know if you've ever come across anyone from the campaign for real ale, but there was a time.
But I like it.
They started in 1971 because there was a time when I was much younger, when I first started drinking beer, that beer was pretty awful. You'd go into a pub and you'd just get some kind of Carlsberg lager. Nothing against Carlsberg, by the way, but it was all the same. And it was all gassy.
It was all really gassy.
Dreadful. And then suddenly Campaign for Real Ale came along. Actually, it was kind of cool because they decided to have local small breweries, microbreweries as they call them now, and it was hand pumped and it was a bit of a sort of religion. But the people that were in it were all of a certain type. They were kind of, cardigan wearing, sandal wearing, corduroy wearing, sort of,
fashion now,
guys who didn't tend to have girlfriends. I mean, it was a bit like that. And believe it or not, right, because I applied for every job there was at the beginning of my journalistic
You didn't
career.
apply for a job at these people?
I did. I applied for a job.
Does that mean you didn't have a girlfriend at the time?
No, I did have a girlfriend at the time, and that's when I realised. That was when I realised it wasn't going to work for me because I wouldn't be able to bring her along because they'd be like, "What's that? It's a girl, is it? Blimey, what do they do? They don't drink beer, no." So I had to go to St Albans, right, for the interview because, of course, they were based in St Albans. And I was applying for the job of editor of the Campaign for Real Ale's monthly magazine. I mean,
which must have been a stimulating read.
It wasn't
about drinking. How much can you get?
It wasn't the worst job I applied for, but that's another story. Anyway, so we went and we met in this sort of ramshackle building, and then we went to the pub. And sure enough, the guy who was interviewing me was wearing a sort of mustard-coloured cardigan, sort of tartan shirt, had a beard, and was wearing sandals. And we went to the pub and we met 5 other people who all looked exactly the same. And we're standing, and they're all kind of talking about the beer. Anyway, the reason for them being put into Plank of the Week is because they've now decided to change their image. And believe it or not, they've gone for a diversity drive so that they could lose their image of being male, pale, and stale, which they'll never do.
No, because the thing is, they're the people that are interested in that. Why try and force somebody else to be interested when they're not interested in it?
There's presumably an advert for a diversity and inclusion officer.
Well, they'll have to start with that. But apparently they're quizzing members now who are in their organisation about their sexual orientation, their ethnicity, and, wait for it, their gender identity assigned at birth. I mean,
that's
I don't like to get into trouble with
hear.
Stop.
I don't want to get into trouble with the more, shall we say, progressive members of our panel. But I mean, assigned at birth is not something I'd buy into. I mean, you were born, weren't you? Either a boy or a girl.
Yes.
Were you not? I was not assigned a gender at birth. I didn't fill out any forms.
No, listen. The thing is about all of this is that they just jumping on a bandwagon now because they feel they is it something to get them in the press? Because let's be honest, there are not many people that are that interested in ale. You have to be a certain type, like you said.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how much you're pushing for all of these diversities. I don't understand what the point is. You go for the person that's interested in the job and is best for the job.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand what they're doing here. And they're doing it on so many other platforms, aren't they? Just leave it be.
All you need is one person in the organisation to say, "Oh, I don't think we're doing enough about this."
That's madness. What they should be doing is saying, actually, we've done our job rather well, and we could basically put the whole thing into pause mode,
what they
into
ought to be
sleep,
doing,
because they've done a great job.
Well, what they ought to be doing is lobbying the government to try and reduce the tax on beer.
Yeah.
Or something.
They could, yes.
Something
or make
useful.
something useful. I mean,
Something
what they're
useful.
doing assigning people's birth. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I know. Anyway, so Camera, you're absolute
proper
complete and utter
nomination.
planks. Luckily, I didn't get the job. I can't remember I think I was shortlisted or something, but fortunately they gave it to somebody because I was only about 21. You see, I kept surprised when I turned up, they'd all go, "Oh, you're a bit young," because I didn't really shave or anything.
You haven't drunk enough ale.
And I didn't really. I mean,
did you have a beard at the time? Was your beard not?
No, I couldn't even grow one. I couldn't grow a beard.
Nor could I.
I've actually never grown a beard, but I didn't even
ever.
shave until I was 23. I was one of those late developers. So, anyway, sorry guys, you could have had me. And instead,
just imagine how successful they would have been. I mean, they would have been a global media empire if they had mine.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. Anyway, so who's your third one?
So my third one is Justin Trudeau.
Of course.
Who is, I mean...
the world's hide-and-seek champion.
Yeah.
I mean, he is just such... He is, absolutely. He is the weakest, most pathetic of all men. And what's really funny is because, when he first kind of came to power, I remember a lot of women who, he was
Everyone thought he was a babe,
they thought he was a babe, and he was young, and he was handsome, and he was, masculine. And he is such a ridiculous, pathetic squid of a man.
Oh, he is.
It's unbelievable. What he has done here by ignoring his people. And the fact of the matter is that in March... 2020, the 31st of March, he said he wanted the people to thank the truckers. They had a hashtag, thank a trucker for everything they're doing to help however you can.
Yes.
So he went out of his way to thank these people that had carried on working, delivered everything, did everything they were supposed to do. And now he's calling them racists, he's calling them extremists. The fact of the matter is that 1 million people are coming out on the streets to cheer these truckers on.
Quite remarkable.
Over 50,000 trucks. It's going to be in the Guinness Book of Records.
I think it's 100 kilometres long or something now, isn't it?
100 kilometres long.
Just extraordinary.
So, as well as Justin being pathetic, weak-livered squid, so is the mainstream social media of the whole world, mainstream media of the world. It's not been on the news, not on the BBC, not on ITV,
the BBC
Channel 4.
finally did a story on it, actually. I think it was yesterday. But literally it was online. I don't know if they did it on...
There was nothing over the weekend.
There was nothing over the weekend while it was all going on.
I don't think it was actually on television, but it was online. They did an online story on it.
Well, how can that be? It's the biggest world news story going on at the moment. It really is. That these people are fighting to have body autonomy, to decide what goes into their bodies and to push back against the overstep of powers, like we've got in New Zealand and in Canada now.
Are they not having to be vaccinated in order to cross the border?
Yes, to cross the border.
Because it works both ways. And I think I'm right in that the American truckers have also...
They're coming out.
Mandated to be vaccinated to cross the border, so it works both ways.
I know, it's madness, isn't it?
And how
but for me, it became, even if you didn't think it was a big story then, when Justin Trudeau suddenly went into hiding with his family, you got to go in, sorry, what do you mean he's gone into hiding? Nobody knows. I don't know if he's come out yet. Somebody said to me today they think he's got COVID now.
Yes, that's right. How many times has he had COVID?
Oh my goodness, this is the point. So every single time there's something to discuss, I'm so sorry, I've got COVID. I've been in touch with someone who's got COVID.
He's the COVID prince, queen and king of COVID. It's extraordinary.
It's a great way, isn't it, of not having to talk about things. Right. You just say you've got COVID, you isolate, and then you don't have to face the press.
Of course,
you don't have to deal with
that's what Boris did.
I mean, he has been so rude with them. He's called, like we said, they are a small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa, who are holding unacceptable views that they are expressing, do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know and how to follow the science. Well, we know the science doesn't work in this one because it depends on whose science you're following, doesn't it? I know so many doctors and scientists who are now saying, if Canada had Omicron now, like we have, it's end of game. Like we're very lucky in Britain we've got that. So which side?
And also a lot of them are now going back on what they said before and saying, oh, well, of course, now that things are different because so many people are vaccinated, maybe, in retrospect, we shouldn't have done some of those things that we did. But we didn't know that then.
It's whether any
of
of
these... So the science is always moving, isn't it?
Well, this is the point. Will any of these leaders ever have the courage to say, actually, there's no such thing as the science? Science is never settled. Science always evolves.
Absolutely.
And science progresses because different scientists challenge other scientists to check their views and to learn from each other. That's how you make progress. There's no such thing as the science.
The problem is, and this is what is so frightening, is that there is no debate now. So if you are a scientist that doesn't agree with the narrative, you're cancelled and you're blocked. And that's not how we behave in the free world.
I think it's beginning to change. I was saying to somebody today, watching all of that yesterday in Parliament and watching Boris Johnson sort of squirm and have to answer questions from people talking about how other people had suffered. You can see that there's a change. You can see that people are going, that really doesn't look like the right thing to do, and it shouldn't have been,
But you're right, But I think once again, the people are realising this before the politicians have the courage to say.
So they'll start getting it when they start to see
and
the
you're
polls.
starting to see journalists from the mainstream media who supported the madness, starting to try and wriggle their way into a different position.
Wriggle because they are
and
on their tummies.
eventually, some of the politicians will be faced with having to either admit that there are different forms of science and different views, whether they do that or whether they just say the science has changed, or do they have the courage to say their form of science that they followed was wrong.
Was actually wrong.
But things
and I doubt they will.
But things like, that will blow it. We when you feel explosions are going up in your mind. So when there was actually a conversation of whether a Scotch egg is a reasonable meal, when we had a 10 o'clock curfew for an airborne virus,
for no reason.
I was going around going, it's an airborne virus.
Yeah.
What is going on?
But it stops at 10 o'clock. And of course, it doesn't like Scotch eggs.
No.
So you're safe.
So this
and
is
as long as you're in a group of less than 6 people, you're fine.
Thank you. So these rules were being churned out, and I was banging my head against the wall saying, this is nuts.
Yeah.
And yet the government was giving us these rules.
Yeah, I know. Well, that was the most appalling thing for me when we found out what the conversation was in Cabinet about why they came up with the rule of 6. The only other opposing view was whether it should be the rule of 8. And that was all, whether it should be 8 or 6, not how about we shouldn't have it.
Unbelievable.
Incredible.
Anyway, the virus is very clever. It works out. If there's only 4 of you, I won't touch you.
And also,
but if there's 7 of you, you're in trouble.
It doesn't get you if you're eating or drinking, apparently.
Particularly if it's a Scotch egg.
Yeah.
And of course, then it's of course, the rules get enforced by the boys and girls in blue.
But do you remember, we've all got stories, I'm sure. I remember going to the local pub, the Horseshoe, when they first reopened and you could only drink outside.
Yeah.
And guys would turn up from Southwark Council with the old high-vis on and, COVID Marshal on the back, telling us that we were standing too near the pub. And you can't go in, sorry.
That very first day, and I paid for a drink and gave the waiter, I think it was a 10 quid note.
Right.
And they came back with a £5, and they'd washed the £5.
No.
They had washed the £5 of COVID.
Dear God.
The other one, I've got to give this story because it's around the corner from here, in Borough Market.
Yes.
So I took my son to Borough Market and we went to get something to eat. And we were standing still eating, and this high-vis guy came up and said, you've got to walk. You can't stand still.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
I'm outdoors,
Yes.
you've got to walk. And I was going, you're going to have to carry me.
Right.
And really kind of getting cross. But the thing is, what was happening is, because I was with my youngest son, and he was going, oh, please don't get into a row. Yeah. And this is what they did.
And they don't want you to, yeah.
They don't want you to argue. I'm outside in Borough Market eating, but I had to do this while I was eating in a circle because of COVID.
But meanwhile, the guy who's prepared it for you isn't walking. He's standing or sitting, possibly.
But we have been saying this. We have been saying this throughout, and it's unbelievable that so many people felt that it was necessary to follow these rules. How did that happen?
Nudged, terrified, scared, put into a complete sort of, almost like a cauldron of fear. And that's where it ended up.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because I sometimes think about why people like us have seemingly been immune to that. I don't know why. I don't know what the answer is to that. Because we're not all the same. We're not all exactly,
I think we had the courage to look at different things sort of dispassionately, logically, with an element of common sense,
right,
and say, "Hang on, really? For me, it was about 2.5, 3 weeks, and I felt something's not right at all. But the pasting that we all got for having the temerity to write to people, and it was so bad. Sometimes you just sort of recoiled in horror and thought, maybe I'm wrong. And you re-look at it and then, something's not right here.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, which brings us to your final
Brings us to the final one. Well, I talked about the boys and girls in blue, and of course in London they're led by the esteemed, marvellous Cressida Dick.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Still in the job. And let's remember... Apparently they can't find anyone better.
Well, so she was reappointed with the ringing endorsement of the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary saying she was the continuity candidate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the continuity. And that there was no one else who looked as though they could be any better. I mean, frankly, I would bring in someone from the military who's got a serious track record of running a big organisation with some discipline and with some proper output and some proper performance.
Ronald McDonald
but Cressida Dick, having said that they weren't going to investigate the supposed COVID crimes because they happened in the past, and we don't investigate crimes retrospectively.
No,
so do you only investigate things that might happen in the future? How does that work?
Or have just happened now, in the present.
So she'd said that, and then they said, actually last Tuesday, she said that they were going to investigate this, but don't worry, Sue Gray, you can carry on as planned. We're just going to investigate alongside. And then by the end of the week, no, all bets are off. This is clearly so serious that actually, Sue Gray, you can't now publish your full report. We need to consume everything. And so you think, hang on, what's gone on here? How has she created such a degree of U-turns and shambolic inconsistency that you end up thinking, is she in cahoots with the Prime Minister that extended her contract? Because, of course, what she's successfully done...
Well, it does,
that's what it feels like.
And in a sense, it feels like that because it's so bad. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that's actually what happened. I suspect it's more complete cock-up than conspiracy.
Oh, come on, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That's exactly what went on here. That's exactly what's going on here.
You're saying there should be another inquiry? We'll have another inquiry and find out a couple of years down the road. And so how did this inquiry happen?
Nobody cares. No. I don't want an inquiry. I don't care. It's been done. Never do it again. That's all I want.
But actually the implications of it, because of course you've got the whole of the Tory party, all their MPs have been saying, we've got to wait for the Sue Gray report. And then all of a sudden, that's days away, it's hours away. And then it could be months away. Yeah. Because it's been kicked into the long grass
and then,
by
but
the
also,
Met Police.
But did the police not say at the very outset of the announcement that they were doing an investigation, actually, no, that won't matter. You can still release the Sue Gray report.
Exactly.
So on day one, they were like, that's fine, you can go, you carry on. And then suddenly, 2 days later, no, you can't.
So what happened? And I think that she's humiliated and embarrassed the good name of the Met Police.
Mm-hmm. Again and again.
Again and again. I mean, multiple instances of this, whether it was Operation Midland, whether it was the report that came out last year about the corruption to do with the Daniel Morgan investigation following his tragic murder. Just so many instances of her personal incompetence. She's damaged the good name of the Met Police. She's interfered with an inquiry into what's gone on in Number 10. And she's actually led to the situation where the whole country we're sort of left in stasis, whilst there's all sorts of massive global events going on, and it's a shambles, utter shambles.
And meanwhile, the crime rates and the detection rates of crime have fallen to literally single figures. 5% of burglaries now solved, something like 6% of
the charge
of
rate
investigations.
Is 6%.
Yes, the charge rate, but the actual...
That's not the conviction rate,
no.
That's the charge rate.
Yeah, but in terms of burglary, only 5% of the crimes are even investigated. Never mind solved.
She has firmly established herself, in my view, as one of the nation's greatest ever planks.
Yes, I think that's
In fact, maybe she's plod of the week.
Plod of the week would be good, yeah.
But if you're right about the cover-up... Do you see what... If you're right about the cover-up theory, then actually she's plant of the week.
Yeah.
Not plank, not plod, but plant of the week.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. It's a sort of triumvirate of...
She's a triumphant. She's a triple plodder, planker, planter.
Yeah, amazing. Easy for you to say. Right, we're going to rush now because we've got to finish up. My final one is the highway code. This is something we talked about a lot last week, but it came sort of a little bit too late for the planks list. So I'm going to say the highway code. I don't know what about you at the weekend, but I saw an awful lot of people on social media posting pictures of cyclists cycling sort of 4 abreast, 8 of them ahead. There was some in Dorset, apparently, who deliberately just took off in front of a whole load of cars and didn't move. And there was like 8 of them, and they were kind of turning around and laughing at the people behind them stuck in a traffic jam. And I mean, I was actually out just the other day, and there was a bike coming like that. There was somebody walking there, and nobody now knows who's got priority because everybody's now confused. Cyclists think they've got priority. Pedestrians think they've got it. Car drivers are annoyed that either one of them has got it. And it's a shambles.
What they've done is very, very dangerous.
It is.
I am the wife of a cyclist. He loves to cycle.
Okay.
But I find cyclists, those men in lycra, those just so irritated. Oh, no. In defence of my husband, he can wear lycra, most men can't.
Yeah.
But they are causing problems that people are going to get hurt now.
Yeah.
Because, it's so frustrating. I was cycling behind some cyclists. There were 3 abreast. They were going very slowly. They're chatting to each other, as you said, and it makes you the road rage, and it's so annoying. It's so aging as well to be angry. So I try not to be. And what can you do? There's nothing you can do now because the law isn't on your side. No. And all these kids that cross the road looking at their phones because they now think they've got the law on their side.
A woman who was obviously on her way to work literally just crossed. I was driving, crossed the road right in front of me as I was about to turn in. Didn't even look.
But how can this be done? How have they done this? On what grounds?
Well, do you know why they've done it? Because they want us all to walk and cycle. So they've tried to encourage us. It's a nudge lot again. So they've hired Chris Boardman, who is the cycling sort of czar now of Britain. I think they've hired about 100 other people to work in his department, which is effectively
another Quango.
Yeah, another Quango. It's the
what about
sustainable travel department or something ridiculous, And they want us all out of our cars so that we can actually.
But it encourages a particular group to be selfish and deliberately to be selfish. And I think that's awful, as opposed to saying, let's have a bit of just common sense, a bit of courtesy. It doesn't cost anything to have a bit of manners and just say, I don't want to inconvenience you. There's a much better way of doing this than what they've done, which I just think it's actually encouraging people to be selfish.
Yeah.
I don't have a car. I don't have a car. My daughter's got a car. My husband's got a car. I don't have a car. I am a walker. I like walking everywhere, and I like public transport. It's the way I travel. Yeah. But
because you live in London, though.
I live in London,
Lots of people don't have public transport.
Let me also add that my children are grown up now. How this whole kind of why get on your bike and cycle or walk. What do you do if you've got 2 young children? What do you do? So hoik them all on the bike and take them to school or to nursery and back. It's just unfair on young families to expect them to do without a car. Yeah. These laws are not thought through well.
No. And that's why the Highway Code is a plank. Whoever came up with it, nobody knows what it is. But we are at the end. We've now got 10 nominations, including Boris Johnson carried over. So we've got to do the quick reduce 3 down into 1. So, Tonia, why don't you tell Richard who your 3 are and he can pick one?
So my 3 were Justin, and Sajid, and Jacinta.
I think that it's got to be Justin. The Trudeau.
It has to, doesn't it?
Yeah, he is just unbelievable. And a coward at that, as well as a plank.
I think that's what the worst of it is, isn't it? It's just, can you imagine if he was leader? He's the leader of your land, that little liver-lilied
Where
coward.
Is he? He's hiding.
He's hiding.
Yeah. I mean, who hides when you're over sort of the age of 7? You don't hide.
No.
Come out.
Come out.
Your 3, I'll pick one.
So my 3 was Neil Young.
Yeah.
Was Ian Blackford.
Yes.
And, of course, Cressida, Plant, Plank.
I think it's got to be Cressida, hasn't it? It's got to be Cressida, particularly this week. All right, so my 3, the Highway Code, Whoopi Goldberg, and Camera. I can't believe I've got 3 that aren't political.
No,
I never do that.
For me, it's got to be Whoopi. Because I think, the extent of her anti-Semitism and her racism is so bad that it's...
So shocking.
And she's someone that's allegedly a comedian.
Yes.
That it's got to be her.
Okay, so... We're down to Whoopi Goldberg, Cressida Dick and Justin Trudeau. It's a pretty gruesome threesome,
isn't it?
Isn't it?
Gruesome threesome.
You wouldn't want to be stuck in a train carriage with that threesome, would you?
No.
Can you imagine?
Wouldn't be stuck anywhere.
No. Well, I mean, I suppose Justin would be hiding somewhere. He'd be hiding in the toilet. Don't be in the toilet. I'm not coming out.
So therefore, I think it's got to be him, Mike.
I think he's a very good one, isn't he?
Yeah,
international. Because Cressida Dick, she could be number 2, but she has been in there before.
Yeah.
And she'll no doubt be in there again. I got a feeling that over the next year, she's going to be in it quite a lot.
For sure.
So Justin Trudeau, Cressida 2nd, Whoopi Goldberg 3rd, do you think? Happy with that?
Yeah.
Well, there we are. So, well done to Justin Trudeau. You can't hide from us because we've just made you Plank of the Week.